How many of you are looking at practice questions to help you prepare for the CNE exam? We see that question in Facebook groups all the time. Which resources should I use? And I need more practice questions. Which platform should I use? And is this a reliable resource to help me achieve certification? So for colleagues that are on the journey, we continue to have two recommendations for you. First of all, follow a solid study plan that's evidence-based, like our 7-week study plan. And then second of all, only use Billings and Halstead and Dr. Caputi to help you close your knowledge gaps. And this is why. When you get to the CNE exam, first of all, every exam is different. No two exams are exactly alike. There are two versions that NLN talks about. However, we know there's a test bank that they pull from. And even though you may feel tempted to use different software that only has practice questions, or maybe a workbook that only has practice questions, that is not our recommendation. And here is why. We have surveyed and continue to survey hundreds of nurse educator colleagues across the country. And this is what we have consistently found based on the data that we have collected. Our ability to answer the question correctly on the CNE exam is tied to our transformative experiences as we go deeper into comprehension of concepts. We're excited that NLN reported that as of September 2024, 70% is the pass rate for the CNE exam. Now, that is an increase from 64% in 2023. So we're excited about that, but that is certainly not our goal. We have anywhere from a 97 to 100% success rate, depending on the week and depending on the month. We continue to collect data that is self-reported by colleagues like you that are on the journey. Now, for colleagues that are not on the journey, we still want you to think about the content that we're going to discuss today, which is directly tied to our ability to analyze our students' learning as well as our individual learning as we think about how we're going to become 1% better in the classroom, in the sim lab, in the skills lab, in the clinical setting every single day that we're working with our students. And if you're watching this live launch, we're delighted that you are here even over a holiday break. And for those that are watching this later on your journey, we're excited that you are here too. So make sure you go ahead and subscribe to this channel so you'll be notified right away as soon as a new snapshot is released. If you haven't already, go ahead and pull out your study worksheet. Now, we want you to go ahead and write down today's date, whichever date you're watching this snapshot. And then we want you to write down, second of all, what is your goal for tuning in today? What is it that you want to walk away with having a better understanding about? Okay. And then if you have Billings and Halstead, we're going to be focusing on chapter 24 in the 6th edition, okay, which is this one. We're continuing to use this edition because we know that the current CNE exams were based off of and aligned with content from the 6th edition, okay? If you have the 7th edition, that's great. Go ahead and print out the actual document that's right here in the description that is going to help you map page numbers to the actual 7th edition, okay? That's our crosswalk that is listed here in the description. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and take a look at our content today. And just like we always do, we will wrap up answering that thought-provoking question. I know some of you have already seen it. When memorizing is not enough, that's what we're talking about today. The next step you want to take on your journey is doing a deep analysis of concepts. So what is analysis? What do we mean by that? Okay, so there's 4 different definitions that we're going to look at. First is the science definition, which says it is associated with breaking down compounds to study their elements. We know that compounds are very complicated in science. You think about a simple one like H2O, and then we have more complex ones that can be, 4 or 5 different elements. And when you think about that science table. All right. And then education is about examining students' performance data for insights. We gather data, right? And then we analyze it to help inform us about changes we want to make to our exams, changes that we want to make regarding our learning experiences that we're developing for our students. Motivation is what gets us started. Habit is what keeps us going, right? So think about the new year coming up, right? Or the new year that's here, depending on when you're watching the snapshot. Motivation is always exciting, right? So we have this goal that we want to achieve in the new year. And we think about what steps are we going to need to take to get there. Okay, so let me just share one, which is very common. I'm going to be a healthier eater. we think about, okay, first step is I need to make a shopping list, right? So when I go to the grocery store, I already have a plan of what I'm going to cook at home, because we know that healthier eating happens when we cook at home. We know what ingredients are in the food, so there's no question about it. And then the second step is carving out time to not only go to the grocery store to pick up those items, but to also cook, right? So we have to be motivated by going to the grocery store with a list. We have to be motivated to make good patient or good consumption decisions, good dietary considerations when we think about what recipes we're going to cook. So maybe that's something that gets you motivated. For me, it's Pioneer Woman. Anybody else watch Pioneer Woman? Put it in the chat for me, Pioneer Woman. If you are one that likes to watch her episodes and learn a new recipe, right? That's fun. So that may be something that motivates us, or maybe we have an accountability partner. That's really important. Research tells us that we're 70% more likely, at least, to achieve our goals when we are part of a community or we have an accountability partner. And then once we are motivated, right, we're inspired, we're excited about moving forward to achieve that goal. The next step is habit. Habit is what keeps us going, right? So maybe every Wednesday I go to the grocery store and I have my list and I have it all planned out what I'm going to make for the following week, right? That's a habit. Every Wednesday at 6 p.m. I go to the grocery store. And then discipline is what keeps us growing. I am disciplined because I have mapped out the strategy to be a healthier eater in the new year, and I'm going to make sure it happens. How am I going to make sure it happens? I put my Wednesday, 6 p.m. grocery shopping time on my calendar. And I also have outlined exactly what I'm going to prepare at home. Maybe I'll do it Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, because I know on Tuesday night, maybe I'm really busy. Maybe I have a late meeting. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe I'm going to have different plans. Perhaps your partner's going to cook, or maybe you're going to go and hang out with friends or family, right? So that's discipline. And that's what keeps us growing. It helps us stay focused and get just 1% better every day. Analysis is a key to achieving CNE success. Okay, so that's what we're talking about in this snapshot. That pass rate of 70% is for the CNE. For CNE clinical, it is 74, and for CNE novice, it's 84. But this is the secret that we want to make sure you understand. Step one, don't waste time, money, or resources by investing in information that you don't need. Okay, so Billings and Halstead is what we call the Bible when it comes to nursing education. Chapter 24 is going to help you take a deeper dive into comprehension of these concepts. Our step forward and moving towards CNE success is about a transformation, right? That's what we want to happen. We don't want to stay the same. Just like our students' needs are not going to stay the same. We want to evolve and progress to best support them with their learning experiences. All right, last two definitions of analysis. So nursing, it is all about decomposing clinical cases to identify patterns and critical factors. And then critical thinking, it is defined as being able to evaluate arguments by isolating premises and conclusions, right? Our goal is that we are looking at evidence and we are making decisions, say patient care decisions, about what our next steps are going to be based on information, based on data, right? That we're collecting, just like Tanner's clinical judgment model talks about, in order to make the most informed decision that is going to create the best outcome for our patient. So we may, from a collaboration standpoint as a group, just like you see in this image, we may talk about data, right? We may have different perspectives, but ultimately we want to go back to the evidence, okay? We're going to take, of course, our lived experiences that is going to influence what our decision is going to be. However, we want to ultimately make our decisions based on data, right? We want to make data-driven decisions as we're analyzing what that information and what that data is going to be. The analysis is foundational to inquiry and problem solving. I'm not sure what happened to my G there, but that is the step that we want to think about. It's that starting with that solid foundation. As we think about data that we're collecting to inform us about whether or not learning has happened, we are truly untying those elements. So let me give you an example. As it relates to our nursing students, we're thinking about what is it that they are comprehending in our course? What are those learning objectives for each individual learning experience that we develop for our students? And we're aligning it with ultimately our learning objectives for the course. And then that higher level is, how is it aligned with the program outcomes? Ultimately, how am I mapping to NCLEX or NextGen so that my students can be successful, right, incrementally, where I'm scaffolding their learning, I'm building on prior knowledge, prior experiences in a way that they're comprehending concepts. So when I look at my analysis picture, I am confident that my students have been developed from a foundational standpoint, that I've integrated these core principles that are going to help them advance their knowledge, their skills, and their abilities clinically, as well as from a didactic standpoint. So how do our students bloom? Well, when we look at analysis, we can see that it's all about drawing connections amongst ideas. These are some of the verbs that are at that level: differentiate, organize, relate, compare, contrast, distinguish, examine, experiment, question, and test. Where do these verbs show up? In our learning objectives, even in our learning experiences that we are developing for our students, as well as in our evaluation strategies that we are identifying and ultimately aligning with the content that we are teaching in our courses. Okay, so how does this show up on your CNE journey? Maybe you are also considering not only the CNE journey, but you're considering, how do I make sure that I recertify my CNE credential? That's a great question. You want to make sure, first of all, you go to the NLN website and you want to document each of your learning experiences that you're engaging in to make sure that you are ready to recertify, right, your CNE in that 5-year time frame, and that you are mapping it based on the requirements for each of the nurse educator competencies. Okay, again, you can go to nln.org website. That's going to be your best resource. And then once you get to your exam, CNE as an example, you would see information about the recertification process. So again, you want these verbs to be included in your learning experiences that you're crafting for your students every day, in your learning objectives, and ultimately in your evaluation strategies that you are using to truly validate that learning has happened. All right, so now let's take a look at our thought-provoking question. This is centered around analysis, okay? So as a nurse educator, you recently introduced a simulation-based learning activity into your program to improve clinical judgment skills. After the session, you collect data on student performance, including test scores, self-reported confidence levels, and faculty feedback. You must evaluate the effectiveness of the simulation in comparison to traditional lecture-based learning. Which of the following best demonstrates an analysis level approach to interpreting the results? All right, so we have 3 options, and I want you to think about, first of all, even before we go to our options, what is this question really asking me? And what is it that I know for sure about content included in this question? Okay, so I'm going to give you a few seconds to write that down on your paper that you have printed out, or maybe it's just a blank piece of paper, right, that you're taking notes on. All right, so let's take a look at the 3 options now that you've had a chance to really think through this question and maybe some facts that you know about content included in this question. All right, so our first option is A, compare and contrast the performance of students in simulation-based learning with those in traditional lecture-based learning. B is summarize the students' average test scores after the simulation activity to explore additional opportunities in future scenarios. And C, identify and list the learning objectives covered during the simulation session to ensure alignment with program outcomes. How is a great question that you want to think about every single time we are developing evaluation strategies, right? We want to make sure that we are taking the time to think about how is learning really being created in our learning experiences that we're crafting for our students. And then how are we evaluating or validating that that learning has actually happened. So how actually happens on the front end and on the back end when we think about that learning process and the 4 phases associated with the learning that Kolb's experiential learning theory describes. So I want you to take a second to reflect before we wrap up and looking at our answer to our thought-provoking question. I want you to ask yourself and write it down on your sheet of paper, how? So how do I analyze learning? For me, as a nurse educator, how do I validate that I actually comprehend what competency-based education really means? That I understand what are those different levels associated with curriculum development and revision? Okay, so for me, how do I validate that my learning has actually happened? And then for my students, how do I validate that their learning has happened? And when do I do that is that next question I want you to reflect on. When do I analyze? Are there formative experiences? Are there enough formative experiences that happen for learning, right? That happen throughout that learning experience? How many times am I engaging in Socratic questioning with my students, where I'm engaging and really leveraging the value of the pause, right? Of that silence, where I'm allowing students, our learners in the classroom, to process the information before I move on to that next concept that I want to make sure that they comprehend. And then summative, how am I closing the loop with my students? How am I validating that learning and true comprehension of those concepts are happening, right? It is an evaluation of learning. That's what summative evaluation is all about. All right, so the answer to the thought-provoking question is A. So if you chose A, give yourself a round of applause. Compare and contrast the performance of students in simulation-based learning with those traditional lecture-based learning. All right, so if you chose B, I want you to write down, what was it that attracted you to B? Okay, and in the end, what I'll do is I'll go back and recap just so you have, again, close the loop experience. You have a full comprehension of why A is correct and why B and C are not. Okay, so I'll summarize that at the very end. All right, so B, if you chose B, you want to write down why. And then C, identify and list. You want to think about, why did you choose C? Okay, what attracted you to C if you chose that answer, now that you know that A was the best option? All right, in fact, let's just go ahead and do that right now. All right, so I'll go ahead and read to you exactly why the answer A was the best option. Okay, so stay with me. All right, so if you chose A, yes, we want you to celebrate that, but let me tell you why. That's the most important part. If you are unclear about why B or C are not correct, I'm going to help you kind of break down each of these elements. All right, so for when it comes to option A, it demonstrates an analysis of level approach by requiring the synthesis of multiple data points to evaluate relationships and draw conclusions. It aligns with competency 1 by emphasizing learner-centered evaluation and the critical evaluation of teaching methods to improve learning outcomes. All right, so if you chose B, you are incorrect, because summarizing test scores is a foundational task in understanding, but it does not involve deeper evaluation or integration of additional data points, okay? And then the last option, identifying, if you chose that one, it is important, I agree, identifying learning objectives for planning and alignment, but it does not involve that deeper comprehension and analysis of concepts, that critical thinking and evaluation of outcomes. Okay, so hopefully when it comes to your comprehension of why B and C are not correct, hopefully you're able to now have a deeper comprehension as to why. And that's an important step that I want to make sure you all are capturing when you're going and taking a look at the practice questions in Dr. Caputi's review book, or if you're looking at our thought-provoking questions. Okay, so I want you to make sure that you understand the rationale for those incorrect options and the correct options. That's why we took the time in this snapshot to really talk through in detail the rationale for A versus B and C. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. So what's your score out of 5? Okay, so 1 is, as you reflect on kind of where you are on your journey, One is you feel very lost, right, and confused about concepts that we've talked about. That's your level of confidence or competency. And then 5, you have a strong level of competency associated with this content. Now, it may mean that you did not even choose the correct option. So maybe that makes you feel like you're a 1 or a 2. But what's most important is that you now, since we've gone through the correct option and the rationale, where are you on that scale of comprehending the breakdown of identification versus summarizing, okay, with those incorrect options? So 1 again is, it's still muddy point for me. It's alphabet soup. I need to go back and take a deeper dive. Versus 5, you're extremely confident and competent in these areas. Taking a look in our study workbook is also going to help you close your knowledge gap. So chapter 24 in the 6th edition of Billings and Halstead, and then part 2 and 3 in our study workbook if you have that resource available as well. So until next time, we hope the snapshot has been helpful, and we want you to reach out if you have questions, info@drsellerseducate.com. We are excited about our upcoming spring series. I know, I can't believe that it's springtime already, but we have already developed our curriculum for our spring series. And so you're going to be launching new year, new goals, right? That's our theme as we continue our discussion and exploring how can we get 1% better every day. We look forward to seeing you in our spring series and all of our upcoming workshops. Have a great one, everybody.